Scott Dochterman. Chad Leistikow. Together on one pod, talking odds and all things Big Ten. Powered by GameDay Men's Health, with locations in Ankeny, West Des Moines, and North Liberty. From the Channel Seed Studios, this is Legends and Listeners. Exclusively on Iowa Everywhere.
Hey, Hawkeye fans, Big Ten fans, and Iowans everywhere. Welcome to episode 53 of Legends and Listeners here on the Iowa Everywhere Network. I am Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register, joined as always by the athletic Scott Dochterman, the national writer extraordinaire for the Athletic. We're coming to you live from the Channel Seed Studios as always. Scott, fall camp is in full swing. Iowa football's Media Day and Kids Day are coming up this Friday and Saturday. Likely we'll look ahead to those things as this show goes on. But did want to spend quite a bit of time here on Tim Lester. Interesting guy. Talked to him last week. We want to talk about my podcast that's on Hawk Central with him and the conversation I had. And as you are Mr. NFL, you're like the guy that knows more about the NFL than anyone I know. There's a lot of NFL conversation in that, and it's kind of, it's kind of exciting, I think, to feel like Iowa's getting an NFL offense that's very relevant in the NFL.
I agree. I like what I heard from him. I liked what I heard from him in the spring. I know where he's come from and who he's worked with. So I think, being able to incorporate the Shanahan offense, the verbiage will be interesting I will like to talk to Cade and find out how that all works, because that is such a lot of times those plays. So I think getting the headsets are going to be very helpful for these players and for Tim himself. But I really like this style. I think it's going to work well. I think it meshes well with what Kirk likes to do in the running game. And there was a lot of things I liked when I heard and listened to your podcast about how he, first of all, he's got a very interesting background. I think that people will be intrigued and listen to. And then also, but his philosophy, it's not that outlandish for something Iowa wants to do. And I think pro style is the way to go at Iowa. He's certainly with Kirk Ferentz, and there was a lot there. I think there's a lot to digest. And I think it's one of those podcasts from time to time you get with, and you're like, maybe I should listen to this again to see if I missed anything.
Yeah. I actually, I got a lot out of it. I learned a lot, I would say. And I know, there are a lot of questions that you could have another podcast with. I only had our radio show that we do is like 48 minutes. So we kind of had to squeeze it into all that. But I think you mentioned the running game, and that was what stuck out to me. I know we knew this, I guess, but he was talking about how there are a couple running plays in the Shanahan system that are a little bit different. And you think about the Niners with Christian McCaffrey. Now, Iowa doesn't have a Christian McCaffrey. Not yet anyway. Brevendal maybe someday, but I'm just kidding. And he's like, if you can get those going, then everything kind of builds off of that. And so that was one thing that I could see, like him talking to Kirk, like when they were in that process, that 5-day window between the Packers ending their season and when Lester was offered the job. Like I could kind of envision Kirk getting excited about, this is like, it's all built around the run, Kirk. And we can be explosive with the run game. Like those two things. And what was funny, I thought was kind of funny, was like, you look at the Niners, like they got McCaffrey, they got Trent Williams left tackle, like anybody could play quarterback. And I thought, wow, shots fired for the Cyhawk already.
Yeah.
But no, that's kind of the idea. That's what he said as a player. Like when you can run the ball, I mean, it is pretty simple. And I'm sure Kirk really liked the sounds of that.
Well, it's easiest to control the game when you can run the ball effectively, because you are imposing your will, you're dictating tempo, you're moving the ball, you're doing what you want to do. That's the easiest, and you're opportunities for failure are limited when you can do that. And, one of the things I really liked about, when you look back statistically at what he did primarily at Western Michigan, at worst, they were 41st in the country in rushing yards per game. They were three times they actually had averaged more than 200 yards a game rushing. So this isn't just you're not throwing in somebody who wants to fill it up 50 times a game and run it 15 and do all these different things, but everything is predicated on the running game and in his offense and in the Shanahan offense. And when you go, wide zone and you have a tackle, and of course, if you have a tight end like Kittle and a fullback like Juszczyk, who's more like a tight end than anything. And then, and then there's other variances. I think Green Bay is probably closer to Iowa in style because of the tight ends. They have younger ones, but and then, probably less so like LA because they operate in 11 personnel a lot, and so I think there's pieces you can take from this, and it all seems to work. And a lot of it is motion based. And I was intrigued by how he kind of broke it down.
So how do you think he'll present it? He said the presentation is different with everybody. Like Miami, has Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. San Francisco goes 21. Rams go 11. You think Iowa builds this out of 12 probably?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because that was one of the things I asked him about specifically was Iowa, when with your zone read, or I should say more your RPO, a lot of times that's based out of 11. But in this case, Iowa is a heavy 12. And when you have Luke Lachey, and then you got to figure, is Addison Ostrenga a better player to play more snaps than your number 3 receiver? And I would say probably a little bit more now. Yeah. But, you probably want to vary it. Yeah, I think 12 is the way to go, because then you can motion guys, and then you can motion them into blocking positions. Mm-hmm. And so you're kind of having double achievement there. If you're motioning a tight end as almost a running threat to some extent, and he's not going to run it, but you're still holding that second level and third level accountable, that they cannot just rush to that spot. However, then you have a blocking threat, which you don't really with a receiver. I think they're going to build it out of 12, but also have a heavy dose of 11. I don't think you're going to see much 21. Right. I don't think fullback's going to be part of this, except for a handful of plays a game.
Yeah, that good analysis there. He mentioned how the Rams with Sean McVay, they go 99% 11 personnel. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But he also, another thing he kind of threw in there, and what's cool about Tim Lester, as I learn more about him, is that people scoffed initially. Some people scoffed initially. Oh, he's a defensive analyst at Green Bay. Like, what the heck? But he's studying the other offenses. Mm-hmm. So he said he has most of the playbooks of all the Shanahan systems out there. So what he said about the Rams, for example, is like Puka Nacua is more of a tight end in their offense, like a heavier, and we've seen that. And that's why he used to be Cooper Kupp. Now it's Puka Nacua. So you can have that flexibility, I guess. You can still run 11 if you're Iowa, but maybe Addison Ostrenga is the slot receiver or whatever, or second, or the tight end or whatever. So that was one thing that I also like. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because your personnel is going to change every year. Maybe Iowa doesn't have great tight ends next year, Scott. Maybe they're more of a traditional 11 team next year. Most of the receivers do come back. And I think if he can build something with this offense, you're going to be able to attract more playmakers at receiver to come here, especially if you're running a system that's run in the NFL.
Yeah, for sure. And you got to produce at an NFL level. That's Iowa's is kind of for years, way too many years, kind of said, we're a pro style offense. Well, you're a pro style offense, and 1993, but now you're not. Now you're a legitimate pro style offense. But the good thing is when you have versatile pieces, and they have had those before. I think TJ Washington fits into that. If he can be a slot guy, but he can also run and maybe block a little, you've got somebody there that can fit multiple roles. I think Strenga's that way. I wouldn't sneeze too hard on some of the other tight ends either. A Gavin Hoffman, possibly Johnny Jacuzzi, Pascuzzi.
Yeah.
Some of the others that, Ortworth, who played a little bit last year. I think that they all can fit in that role. And then you look at the receivers and, they want to have an X. It looks like Jarrett Bowie is a guy that they're pretty high on, and they think he's going to have a chance to do some good things. So he's kind of fitting that role as the X. But, week 2, Caleb Brown's going to see some heavy action, and Caden Weejan's going to get all kinds of looks, as well as Seth Anderson. So I think there's some versatility. And I think the more that they get into this, Chad, if this offense is long-term, then I think you can have that tight end, maybe not Noah Fant, but be able to do the things that specialist was able to do.
You always throw in these little lines that make me laugh. That's special. A specialist.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. Can you imagine the Leicester offense, at least the Shanahan offense? I mean, man, with those two guys would have been something else. Potentially. What else? What else stood out from that interview that maybe you want to talk about?
Well, I think some of the things, when he said markers, as far as, and I think you brought it up too, going from being, a last, I think it was at Syracuse, to the mid 60s as far as rankings go. I don't know that rankings are the be all end all. I think it's more about improvement in statistics than the rankings, because the rankings fluctuate. I mean, you look back at what would have been a top 10 offense back 20 years ago is now a top 30 offense, just because offense has changed. But I think for Iowa, it's about, improved production, and, third down percentage was something that he brought up. And that's something that I think is one of the really core areas for Iowa. Across the board, that it needs to be good. I mean, one area that he brought up that I never really thought about with Iowa that he measures success more so is explosive plays.
Mm-hmm.
And Iowa, of course, was not good at it, and they haven't been good at it for a long time. But that's a big deal if you can, just like on defense, if you could prevent them, which they've been really good at all these years. If you can actually have some on offense, and Chad, how many times have I know I've thought about it. Can you imagine if Spencer Petras hits Keegan Johnson on a 60-yard touchdown pass down the middle of the field, what the crowd is going to do? Explosive plays are just change the dynamic of games, not only the score, but the entire stadium. So the fact that he's thinking like that should excite people. It's like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with a long touchdown pass. It might be kind of fun to witness once in a while.
Yeah, it's funny. We're like at the very end of the interview, if you made it that far, I was like, we're talking about the ball security, run the ball. And he's like, explosive plays, win close games. But I'm like, yeah. But then he's like, throws in, yeah, but if you have a lot of explosive games, maybe you're not in cclose games. I like that thinking.
Yeah.
I like that thinking. It doesn't have to be close if you can.
No.
You can, but you don't have to make every game 13-10. I think I like that he's thinking that way. And the rankings thing didn't I could see Ferentz, for example, being like, I don't know about that when you hear that, but it's good to have goals. Why not give yourself, let's shoot for top 65, which is basically what he's shooting for. Cut it in half.
Yeah.
65th last year is 387 yards per game. I don't think that's that unreasonable. Like
No.
if you're possessing the football, Scott, that's the biggest problem with the total yardage stat for Iowa the last 3 years is they just never have the ball.
Mhm.
That's a big part of it. Possess the ball. Your defense will get you the ball. If you
Mhm.
can actually possess it, like the vintage Wisconsin teams did, you do have a chance to blow some teams out. So I like the way he's thinking there.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that's been fascinating to me, Chad, is Phil talked a lot about it. Seth did a little bit in the defenders about getting more turnovers. Well, the reason why that they were so successful before is because in like 2021, even especially early in the season, is they were having leads, which forces people to throw the ball, which allows them to get after the pass rusher and get in their lanes. And then other teams are pressured into making those mistakes. When you're not possessing the ball and, then they're able to kind of do what they want to do on offense. They're like, let's not make any mistakes ourselves because they're not any good, and so we just can't afford to do anything stupid against this defense because we know they can do. So then that's why they're not getting turnovers. It all works hand in hand. It's complementary, whether people want to hear that word or not. And I think, for Iowa, third down conversion percentage is huge. And they've been so bad at it lately. And you've got to be good at it. And I would say, I always kind of look at like 4 pillars for Iowa's offense specifically: third down percentage, conversion percentage, red zone touchdown percentage, because when you get in there, make it happen. And then when completion percentage be north of 60%. So they haven't been since Beathard. And then yards per carry. You want to be in that minimum of 4.3 to me for it to be really effective. And I think in his case, all those metrics seem to work. That seems to be things that he really kind of prides himself. And, and the other thing that I think people should be excited for is, from 2019 through 2021, they were ranked in the top 25 all 3 times in total offense. That's pretty impressive for
Western Michigan.
Yeah. Western Michigan, not Iowa, but Western Michigan.
Well, yeah. And in that same span, Scott, is where his third, as an example, the third down conversion percentages at Western Michigan were in the mid 40s and high 40s in one of those cases. I think in 21, when he was actually calling the plays at that point. So that's a high number. Iowa's been in the high 20s the last 2 years, bottom of the barrel in college football, 129th back-to-back years. So
yeah,
that's not good. And that's, 3rd and 10 is a big reason for that. When you get nothing on first down and then nothing on second, that's where he's got a history, at least, of success. So that was one thing he, pointed out was, we're not going to be good at everything in year one. We're just not. We don't have the time. We don't have, this is the first, last Wednesday was the first time he's coached a practice with Cade McNamara, in uniform, and Brendan Sullivan for that matter.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be there right away, but what can they get good at? What do you think is most realistic? He was very curious about that. We got to find the things we can get good at the fastest and lean into those things in year one. Because, he's like, we're not going to be great at 2-minute, 4-minute, third and short, third and long, red zone. We're not going to be great at all those things in year one. So what is realistic for what you know about the personnel and what Iowa can do historically?
They've got to lean into running the football. They just have to. That is, to me, that takes the most pressure off the defense. It extends drives. I think that's something that they're capable of doing, especially with a veteran offensive line with 100. I counted up 155 career starts, having some significant running backs. I think that they're capable of doing that and leaning into it. And then from that, with your RPOs, being able to hit more passes in the middle of the field. And I think that's something that they haven't done well for a long, long time. Maybe since Hawkinson was there, that they just, and even then it was kind of a grind. And so I think whether that's slants, that's digs, that's tight end routes, slant seams, whatever. I think that they can go with something like that. The outside routes might be a little more challenging, I think, because Cade is still coming around and the receivers are green, and those are based. A lot of times they are more difficult to master, and they're also more difficult to complete and scarier, because if you throw inside and somebody thinks that they're going outside, and then it could go the other way. So they're dangerous. So I think that they can really hammer that. I think the red zone will probably be the most difficult. Outside of Luke Lachey, you don't really have a proven pass catcher. And so it may be difficult to kind of, without some confidence and consistency in the passing game, to really execute at a good level in the red zone. But if you're getting there and you're scoring points, not that that's, you want to score touchdowns, but if you're getting there at least, then that's helpful. So for me, it's lean in, see if you can run zone, because they haven't run zone really effectively at all since Tyler Goodson was there in 20, when he had Alaric Jackson loading people up. So the last 3 years, they've been pretty bad at it. And so if they can run zone with this and be effective with it, that's going to allow everything else to settle down and feel better, and the defense will play off of it.
Well, thanks as always to our presenting sponsor of Legends and Listeners, GameDay Men's Health. Men, football is very, very important, but there's nothing more important than your health and your well-being. If you haven't made that decision yet, now is the time to get yourself right. Get back in the game with GameDay Men's Health. Testosterone replacement therapy is a game changer. That's just one of the many ways that GameDay can help improve your life, from your mood, your muscle mass, sex drive, energy levels, and they can help with weight loss as well. Get your free, private, no obligation consultation today. Check them out at GameDayMen'sHealth.com or call one of their locations: Ankeny, West Des Moines, and North Liberty. Scott, one of the questions, I'll pose it to you first, and then I can throw my thoughts, is like, or the skeptics out there totally understand. I mean, Iowa offense, be skeptical on. Mm-hmm. Should be. Sure. We absolutely should be. But that this is still going to be Kirk's offense. This is still going to be Kirk putting his thumb on the offense. From what we've heard now, we've gotten a little bit of a glimpse into Lester for 6 months now. What are your thoughts on that?
It's Kirk Ferentz's team. Let's start with that. Kirk Ferentz's program. He's starting year 26 in the program. The dean of coaches. He's 4 wins away from 200 in his career. He gets the right to do whatever he wants. Now, that said, I think he has backed off significantly when it's come to the offense. It seems to me that he is, whether it's the way he wants to do it or has been told to do it, probably a little of both, that he hired Tim Lester to come and do the offense. Fundamentally, they're still practicing with the same fundamentals. That's what all the linemen told me, that hasn't changed, and it shouldn't, because it's winning football if you can do it and execute it. But the verbiage, Kirk has talked about how challenging it has been even for him to capture all of that and the confusions and stuff. Where it, like with Brian, I think, maybe it was, father-son dynamic that really forced Kirk to do what he was going to, to kind of overload it. But I think and with Greg Davis, it was a marriage of the two. It was like Greg's passing scheme, my run scheme, and it didn't work very well. This time around, it seems like it's his. He's going to run it. But when it's 3rd and short, or it's 4th and short, and it's punt or go for it and all that, Kirk has every right to call those plays or be a part of that process. But I think this is, for the first time, probably all along, maybe since 2004 anyway, that this is the first time that Kirk Ferentz is not really the a primary force with the offense and play calling.
That's my read on it too. Like that, because Kirk's even said, like, he's trying to figure things out on offense. So if if he can't figure things out on offense, I'm not saying he can't, but I'm just saying, like, he's sort of learning right now. and he's referenced that a few times with some of his Baltimore Ravens quotes, some Marchibroda quotes. Always good for a good 90s reference from the NFL. Jonathan Ogden.
80s Iowa, 90s NFL. So
it does seem like he's, he even used the word invigorated with the offense. Like I think he's digging this new idea, these new concepts. Now he is going to still want to play ball control, punt it away with the lead. And I don't even know if Tim Lester wants to do anything outside of that. It seems like they connect in terms of what they want to do to win games. So I think it could end up being a real home run hire. It just might not. We don't know that. We're not going to know that for a while. But I would say, Scott, just overall, especially after the conversation this last Monday that I had in his office, I do feel like this was the right hire. This gives them a chance to kind of break out of the Kirk offense, so to speak. It's not his offense, but you know what I mean. Like I feel like he's letting loose a little bit of the stuff he doesn't know as much about, maybe, and the stuff he does, great. So I feel I come out of last week feeling optimistic. Maybe I'm naive. I'm not saying it's going to be great. Said that last week on our show. I don't know how good it's going to be, but I like the process. That's kind of where I'm at.
One thing I've noticed over the years with Iowa, first of all, it's the most self-aware program in the country. I always thought it and Wisconsin were, but now Wisconsin's changed. But I think, and within that, Kirk knows how to play winning football at Iowa. He knows the players that you can get to recruit, the style. It doesn't always work in every other place. Maybe you don't care as much about complimentary football if you're an air raid. It's like, let's just churn it up. Let's just score. And then ask our defense to make big plays. And, so it's like 3rd and 5, get a sack, get a turnover, but don't worry about the minutia that Iowa really cares about. I think he understands the winning philosophy at Iowa better than just about anybody else. And that's complimentary football. And I know that's a kind of this word that people have for it, but it's true. It all works together. The 3-legged stool.
There you go.
Graduate, do it right on the football field. But
didn't see that coming.
I know. But I'm going to give Kirk credit in this area, Chad, that over the last 4 to 5 years, he's had to change a lot in a lot of areas. And that includes off the field, includes on the field. And some of it's been kicking and screaming, and some of it's been willing to do it. But he comes to a good conclusion most of the time. And I think he's in the right spot here. He's the CEO of the University of Iowa football program. He's won a ton of games. And now he can concentrate on the big picture, let people work on the details. And then once in a while, sure, step in. Hey, it's 3rd and 1 from the 40, and it's a 3-point game one way or the other with 6 minutes to go. Your input is important. You're the head coach. You're the one who has to answer for it. And this is a legacy-defining game. It's like it's Wisconsin or something. But, it's also for him, he could say run or pass, but not call the run or pass, or be heavily involved or let, it's like, Tim, what do you think? No, man, I kind of want to, Tim's like, let's go for the home run here. They're going to expect the run. Let's play fake. Let's go deep. And then we've got 4th and 1 to come back. And he's like, I know, but I just want to get the first down here. Those are healthy discussions, and they should be having those. And of course, if they come up with a plan, then execute it. But I don't think Kirk's going to be like Brian, like he was last year. Brian, run it, period. That's what kind of happened last few years.
Sure. And I guess just to wrap that up is I think back to the press conference after Brian was let go, in late October before the Northwestern game. And the tone there from Kirk, it certainly changed a lot. He seems very excited, Like I feel like and even at Big Ten Media Days, you were standing right there, Scott, with him. He was like, I think I asked him, like, what's that, what's it like not coaching with your son anymore? Like, you did it. since 2012. He's been around this program so much. Like, how does that make you feel? Basically, he's like, I don't want to sound callous, but we all just need to move on with our lives. And I think he just kind of needed, I think, to let out that first, I don't want to call it a tantrum. I don't know.
Yeah.
But he was pissed,
Mm-hmm.
and he wanted to show it. But he's definitely moved on and embraced, I think, he's embraced this new coordinator quite a lot. Like, and I think he's onto something. I think they've got somebody pretty good here.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. And I thought from day one, I know there was a lot of pushback on it. And I think it was probably more the idea of Lester than the reality of Lester. And, like, oh man, we could have got this guy. We could have got this, and I was all kind of, be honest with you, I was in favor of Paul Christ for a lot of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But the more I familiarize myself with what Lester is about and what he's doing and how it marries with what Iowa likes to do, I think his style of play probably fits better with what can not only mesh with how Iowa likes to play, but what can take Iowa to another level, which is probably even more important. So I wrote about it a little bit last week about his media day persona, Kirk's. Much more relaxed, much more loose than I've seen him, playful, jabbing things about, what does it mean to be a dark horse? Does the dark horse win or does the light horse win? I've never really wondered why. And, the video game thing still just cracks me up. I mean, somebody asked Kirk Ferentz about video game and then to come back and ask him what was the last game that he played. I mean, Kirk Ferentz, do you think he'd remember what video game he plays? I can't even remember what video game I play, but just kind of some of those playful jabs, he just seemed more relaxed. And I'm sure that's because Brian's not there anymore. That Brian is now in Maryland and is a game analyst. And, because if Brian was still there and he was still the OC, Chad, this would have been, it'd have been like a big, heavy fog going in there. Everything would have been about that. He probably would have gotten some combative questions. It would have just been this moment. But, and the other thing that I think everybody forgets is Kirk has 4 other kids too.
Yeah.
Brian may be the firstborn, the crown prince, but you look at James, he's coaching at the New York Giants, assistant offensive line coach. They called him. Dayball wanted him to do this because they think he's that good. Steve is coaching with South Dakota. I think Steve's going to be on a fast track. He's going to be a really good coach. Joan lives in Iowa City with Tyler, the head of, and people may poo-poo that. And certainly nepotism comes into effect, but Tyler's pretty freaking good at what he does too. He knows his, pretty well. And then, and Kelly might be the nicest one of the bunch. She lives near you, in the middle of Iowa. So, so he's got other kids to worry about, now that Brian has landed, he's got another job. It's like, hey, time to move on. And I think that's probably healthy for everybody, right?
Yeah, I think he's come to grips with that too. It just sometimes it takes time to warm up to a new situation. We've all dealt with that in life. Last thought I have on the Ferentz-Lester dynamic, and we can move on to previewing Media Day and Kids Day if you'd like. But the more I've learned about Lester's background, if you digging into it, Scott, is he's just been at all different levels, and he's made decisions for his family. That was one thing that also stood out to me. He went back to coach D3 so he could be near his ailing, dying father in Chicago, and said he spent 3 great years with him, going to Cubs spring training and having a blast. And, he could have stayed in Division I. He had a hotshot quarterback at Western Michigan under Bill Cubit, and he didn't. He made a decision for family, and he's faced adversity. He had the blown out knee as a player. He was going to go play for the old ball coach, couldn't, found his way at Western Michigan. He's just he's got that story of facing adversity and finding ways around challenges, which I think fits. Kirk likes those things. He likes when guys are haven't made it yet. They haven't arrived necessarily. Tim Lester certainly has not arrived at a Power 5 level yet. He's got a really cool story, good story. I like his pedigree, but hasn't done anything like big at Power 5. So, or Power 4, I guess now. But so I like that. I guess I can see why that fits with Kirk Ferentz. And how about the first guy? He was calling the guy that played for him at Maine
That's amazing.
to get intel on Tim Lester. It's like so Ferentz, like Ben Sermons, the Packers running backs coach happened to play for Kirk Ferentz at Maine. Like Maine. What figures,
I know. There's just so many. Kirk knows everybody. I mean, he really does. And he's been in the game so long that players he coached in FCS in his 3-year stint of 12 and 21, are now with the Packers, but it's hilarious. But one thing Kirk is pretty getting to know him over the years, that he respects the guys who go through the grind, not somebody who, kind of they went for, and all of a sudden, boom, they're the head coach. But, and even then it kind of depends on what they do and how they get there. But somebody like Lester really appeals to him, that he went, the route. He was at Western Michigan, and then he went to Elmhurst, and, he bounced around a lot and in different levels, and, did a lot of different things and worked for different people. So he has different ideas. And I think that's really appealing. And the one indirect or subtle or whatever aspect of this to me is he's a Chicagoland guy. He's from Wheaton, and when you're from that area, that's really helpful, because Iowa has done a really good job of recruiting in there lately. And, Seth is second to none when it comes to recruiting the Chicagoland. That was proven in a confidential that we did this earlier this summer. But, if you add that, people remember him. He's from that area. People know him, and then that works. And if that gets you one more recruit, say a wide receiver from Aurora in a couple of weeks or so, then that's what it's all about, So I think if that could be, because Chicago it's closer to Iowa City than Omaha and Western Iowa.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Scott, want to remind our listeners that Steeple Ridge Bourbon delivers a high quality, delicious drinking, award-winning craft bourbon. So if you need to get some, folks, summer's running out. You got to get your sweet corn and your bourbon. And put it on the grill. Steeple Ridge. If you don't find it at your favorite retailer, ask for it by name. It is distilled, aged, and bottled in Iowa by Lonely Oak Distillery. Some of the parts that were tougher to swallow was like how awesome he said the Packers people were, and he grew up a Bears fan last year. Like he loved the people up there in Green Bay, and just it was tough to hear. And he's like, he knew I was a Bears fan by the end. And I was like all his all his family went to, what was it? It was a game in Soldiers, the opener. Mm-hmm. And they didn't wear, he told me, you can come on the field, but you can't wear Bears stuff. And anyway, so long story short, they're like, wow, all these Green Bay people are pretty nice. So when they went, and they also, I don't know, had some people go up to Lambeau and had a great time. And I don't know, kind of sucked to hear that the Packers beat the Bears again. Everything. Anyway.
Yeah, I remember that. But well, it's kind of the story that former Big Ten assistant commissioner Mark Rudner told me when his son Brad, who was an Iowa grad, went at Michigan, and Brad asked him, "Who do I root for, Dad?" He goes, "You root for the team where they sign your paychecks," and that's what you got to do no matter what. And you may have grown up a Chicago Bear. I mean, think of the guys like Lucas Van Ness and Brian Bulaga, who were Bears fans, and then they ended up playing, wearing green and gold. Or right. Now they got mozzarella colored helmets. This year they're gonna have the white ones for a game, and the mozzarella. But anyway, I think that it is what it is, and now he doesn't have to root for them anymore.
Well, he is buddies with Matt LaFleur, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And he had not. That was the other thing that stood out. He had opportunities to stay in the NFL, so he's driven to make this work at Iowa. He wants his three youngest are 11, 13, and 15. Would love for them to stay in one school, one high school. So there's a chance for this to be a long-term hit, Scott. But what will make it a long-term hit is if the offense is good. And we look ahead to Media Day on Friday, Kids Day on Saturday, Scott. Certainly, I would think for both of us, Cade McNamara, how he's looking, Brendan Sullivan, how he's looking, the offense, how, I don't know. We're not going to see much on Kids Day from the offense. Like, they're not going to show us much. But definitely want to at least hear how that's going. And what are you looking for, I guess? Put it out there.
I guess, looking at the practices more so than anything, I'm interested in, on the offensive side of the ball, just how it flows. What kind of consistency do they have in the running game, and how Cade McNamara, how he drops back and how he looks when it comes to passing. I mean, to me, those are just, we're all going to judge that. And I think we always overanalyze it, but when people start to complain about it, I always say, well, guess what? You only give us one opportunity to do that. So of course that's what we're going to do. If we're in there every day, like our friends at Wisconsin, then we can say, well, yesterday he was sucked, or today he was, yesterday he was really good, and vice versa, but the one thing I always caution people about is don't start overanalyzing the backup quarterback, which of course is like spitting in the wind. It's not going to matter. but offensively, that's really what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I'd like to see solid starting five. I'd like to see Bo Stevens just pushing people off the ball. I mean, it might be tough if Aaron Graves and Y.A. Black are in there, but but is he? If he could be the answer there at left guard. I mean, I feel like that's their best option if he is what he can be. Big, strong guy, just had bad injury luck last year. I feel like he could be the final piece to that offensive line puzzle. That was another thing that came across in the Lester thing. Like, he feels good about the offensive line, Scott. Like, I'm skeptical, obviously, because we haven't seen much from the O-line, but that was the vibe I got from Barnett, too, when he was on our show this summer. And Ferentz, even at the Big Ten, right? I mean, offensive line, he seems encouraged about. So I do want to see that. I'd like to see consistency up front. So I think Stevens is a big part of it, because you don't want to be starting like, oh, I don't know who it's going to be, and then Nick DeYoung's in there rotating, or is it going to be Ellsbury, and maybe we can move Cade Pieper along. I don't know. You just want to have an answer there, I think, before the opener. Just get your starting five out there and start moving people.
Stevens was, a guy who played way too early as a freshman 2 years ago. He was just not ready for that. He should have been a rotational guy. In fact, I would say he should have probably been a backup, and period. But they had to throw people out there. They just, you can't start without a guard. You can't say, well, we're just not very good there, so we're not going to play with a guard. And so, that's why he was out there. And last year he was hurt. And this is when Iowa's typical developmental trajectory starts to pay off. That if you got a guy entering his fourth year and he's got that kind of size, I mean, he's big. He's 6'6", 2. He looks like he'd be a world champion bouncer at a big bar or something, and you just kind of, and if he could be a powerful guy to really load into the interior defensive lineman, it's something we haven't had, or Iowa hasn't had for a while, that they just haven't had that kind of awesome guard that could blow people off the ball. And that's going to be something that he can do. And then you got Connor Colby on the other side, who I think is going to hit his stride. I really think he's going to be one of the better linemen in the Big Ten this year. And I feel the same way about Logan Jones, healthy, if he's healthy, and if this offense system just gives him a fraction of a second, we're going to see a completely different Logan Jones. Now, the one thing I'll say is, on the edge, I think you have two of their better linemen right now in Richmond and Dunker. You know, they're going to kick inside to guard when they're in the pros, but they are pretty good. And I think I think collectively they could be like a fist, you know, that collective unit. And to me, I think the upside is, you know, when you ask what's the upside, well, the upside is that I think this unit could be really similar to what we saw in like 2016 when we had Boone Myers and Cole Croston and Sean Welsh and, you know, players who, you know, I think Keegan
James
Render was
Daniels.
a guard. Yeah, James Daniels was the center, and he's probably a better athlete for sure, and probably a better lineman than any of the ones right now. But I look at the rest of them and I say, there's not a lot of differences here. I mean, I think if anything, they have probably a little more upside now.
Right.
And so if you could block like that as cohesively as they did, then I think this could be a really good unit.
Obviously, defensive line is the other area where we need to see progress. You know, for this to be a good Iowa team. Front four or starting four on defense, fine, great. You know, really good. You know, Craig, Black, Graves, Herkett, but who's behind them? We'll see. You know, has Max Llewellyn taken that next step? Is Brian Allen going to dazzle again on Kids Day? And then what are they looking at defensive tackle? Scott, there's not like a lot of time here. I mean, the season, you know, they'll have another scrimmage like a week after we see them, pretty much, and then they move into game week like a couple days. Then they close camp, go to school, and yeah, they got to make decisions here pretty quick. And so, D tackle, very curious to see what happens there. Curious to see which freshmen maybe are getting a glimpse. You know, who's moved up quickly. You know, one of those two freshman linebackers, or, you know, maybe Joseph Anderson or Chime Chineke, or, you know what I mean? There could be there'll be a surprise in there. You know, there will be somebody's
going to emerge, you know, whether it's a defensive back, you know, it's like, you know,
JJ Parker on offense, maybe. I mean,
yeah. Okay. Yeah. You never know. I mean, and that's the neat thing, because, you know, could all of a sudden you're like, wow, Jalen Watson's with the second team defense, you know, and we've seen it before. I remember Desmond King, you know, was like when Jordan Lomax pulled his hamstring in the opener in 2013, you know, I'm like, okay, who's going to go in? And I was expecting kind of one of the typical backups. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, true freshman Desmond King's going in there. And it's like, ooh. And he just never left because he was, you know, one of the best players that Iowa's ever had. and I think that's going to be the same way here. You know, when I identified 5 positions where they need to really, you know, analyze and grow, depth along the defensive line was my only defensive position that I identified because of what you said. I like their first 4. I think that there are pieces in the backups, but it's like they got to take that step. They can't just be a guy. They can't just, go out and eat a few snaps. You know, Jeremiah Pittman's going to have to be an important player. Brian Allen and Max Llewellyn are going to have to be important players. It might be Jeff Bowie. It might be a couple of the other guys, you know, maybe walk-ons, you know, that fill that role, but that's okay. As long, you know, if you're looking at 10 to 15 snaps a game, if you can go in there and just do your job, don't worry about stats, just get in the way, you're all right. But as you said, I'm anxious to see if one of those freshman athletes provide, because if there's one aspect that I'm kind of concerned about, Chad, it's pass rush off the edge. You know, I think they've got tough dudes. Deontay Craig's a good player and, you know, has had some good rushes, and Ethan Herkett's as tenacious and Iowa-like as you ever want. But do they have somebody who has that burst off the edge? I don't know right now. And, you know, maybe it's Brian Allen, maybe it's Joseph Anderson. And it's like, well, let's just put them out there on third downs and go with our Raider package. And somebody like that could be a part of it.
Well, you know, with how veteran they are this year on defense, they're Seth and Phil and Kirk. They're all going to be thinking like, we got to get some guys moving here. So I wouldn't be surprised if they do that all the time on the O-line, for example. You know, they'll mix guys into that second team if they like what they're seeing. You know, classic. So it's something to look for sure. This Saturday, and week one always could be some surprises there too. But anything else, Scott, before we go? You on your mind?
Well, it's an interesting year, Chad. As we know, this is an 18-team conference. We've hashed out a few days ago the everything with the House case and what that's going to be. But the Big Ten doesn't have its tiebreaker set yet, for the championship game. So one of the things that I know I identified right away was the mess that is. What if Penn State, Iowa, and Oregon all go 8-1, and their loss is the same team, and they don't play one another? How much fun is that going to be to sort this out for who's going to be playing Ohio State and Indianapolis? And
right,
things aren't going to really happen that way, but you never know, right? Something could happen, and if that's the case, it's like, okay, who goes where? And I think this team's got a legitimate shot at it. I do. And I think this is a year where you push all the chips to the middle of the table, because it's not going to be easy, but, like looking ahead at 2025 looks more like a year where it can be challenging to get to a 10-win season, whereas this year it sets up nicely for you to put yourself in that position.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of excitement, anticipation, I should say. And, we're almost to the games, so that'll be the fun part. And it really comes back to the guy we talked about for the first 35 minutes of this show, which is Tim Lester. And how fast can he get this offense going at Iowa? Can he be top 65? Can he be, top 10 in third downs? Stuff like that. That's the stuff that I'm looking for, and I think he's looking for too. So good conversation, man.
Yeah. Well, enjoy your little getaway here.
Yep. We're recording this a little early, just so I'm going to disappear for a few days, but when you see this, I'll have already disappeared. So we wanted to leave this behind for you guys. For Scott Dochterman, this is Chad Leistikow. We have officially reached the 1-year mark on Legends and Listeners. So thank you for watching, for listening. Talk to you next week from the Channel C studios and only on the Iowa Everywhere Network.